This is the fastest way to improve your 3D model, and these are the generative modifiers. Generative modifiers are a type of modifier that create new geometry for your objects and can make them look significantly better. In this video, I'm going to show you how to use all these modifiers to improve your models and renders. Modifiers are good as they are what's called non-destructive editing, which means that they can be reversed easily and won't permanently remove or add geometry. The modifiers that count as generative ones are array, bevel, boolean, build, decimate, edge split, geonodes, mask, mirror, multi-res, remesh, screw, skin, solidify, subdivision surface, triangulate, volume to mesh, weld, and wireframe. I'm going to explain each of them in order, so if you feel like you understand the first couple, you can just jump around to the ones you aren't sure of. The first one is array, which just makes a couple of instances of the mesh. It can be controlled by how many and by the distance between on the Y, X, and Z. The next one is the bevel modifier, which just gives a bevel around the edges of an object, which can be controlled by the length of the bevel, whether it's affecting the edges or the vertices, and by the type of bevel, either super eclipse or custom. I have a video about bevel, check it out. The next one is the boolean modifier, which requires another shape, and just makes it cut out into the original mesh using the other one. It can also be where only the two meshes overlap, or it can become both meshes. The next one is the build modifier, which has a start and length frame time, and basically builds the mesh one edge at a time, for however long the animation is. The next one is a personal favorite called the decimate modifier. I'm going to bring in a more complex model to demonstrate to you guys, but basically what it does is that it reduces the polygon count or face count on an object by using one of three selectable methods. I would suggest to use collapse and to just make the model still somewhat detailed, but not have a boatload of faces that can slow down render times and slow down viewport times. The next one is edge split, which when applied to the mesh detaches the edges at the angle that you've set, meaning that they can move freely from the mesh in edit mode. The next one is geometry nodes, which makes a new geometry node tree that is applied to the object. In this video, I won't be able to explain how geometry nodes works as we would be here for days, so if you're interested, just find out how it works in a different video. The next one is the mask node. To use this, make a new vertex group, then put that new vertex group into the vertex group on the node. Depending on whether you click the two-sided arrow next to the vertex group, it will determine whether only the vertex group is shown or whether the vertex group is hidden. The next modifier is a mirror modifier, which can mirror an object based on the axis, either X, Y, or Z, that you've chosen relative to the origin point. If you want to move the mirror, you can press Ctrl, dot, and then you'll be moving the origin point and also the mirrored mesh. The next modifier is the multi-res modifier, which is probably the most complicated one of them all. To start, you can hit the subdivided button a couple of times, then go into sculpt mode and sculpt things onto the mesh. After you're done to that, go into the shading tab and make a new image, then go into the bake tab and click bake from multi-res, and it should make a new normal map that can be added to a normal map node and then added to the principal shader. This is just a simple way to make a normal map from sculpting. The next modifier is the remesh modifier, which can create the mesh into blocks or a less poly mesh. The next modifier is the screw modifier, which can be used on a curve to make the curve a sort of mesh. By rotating the curve along a point, it can be controlled by the angle and viewport steps. The next modifier is a skin modifier, which can give you a new armature of your edges, and also gives thickness to your edges. To make a new armature, hit the Create Armature button. The next modifier is a solidify modifier, which is best used on single edges and just adds extrusion along the normals of a mesh. The next modifier is a solidify modifier, adds extrusion along the normals of a mesh. The next modifier is a subdivision surface modifier, which adds more subdivisions to your mesh and also smooths it out. The power of the subdivision is based on how many you give. Triangulate turns all the quads on the mesh into triangles, and if you apply these changes, you can see it in action. The next one is volume to mesh, which just turns any volume that you have, whether it be a cloud or dust, and turns it into a mesh. This is really helpful in game assets when you don't want to be rendering out hefty volumes. The next modifier is the weld modifier, which merges the vertexes of a mesh together based on the distance slider that you control. If you want more of them together, make the distance larger. If you want less of them to join, make it smaller. The final modifier in the generate category is the wireframe modifier, which just gives thickness to your edges and turns them into the main part of the mesh. You can then control how thick each edge is by changing the radius slider on the modifier. Now that that's done, you should be on your merry way to making some cool models. But what is a good model without a good render? To check out how to get better renders, check out my video about compositing. Thanks for watching.